I'm Lori Siegel, and you're listening to Mostly Human, a tech podcast through a human lens.
So where did this investigation really start?
Okay, so it's a good question. I feel like I have spent the last 15 years covering technology, but the thing that I always think I'd like to say I've done is kind of look around the corners and be like, oh, this is what's coming next. So like asking tech founders those questions of like, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And then in 2022, we saw this like new era of technology with artificial intelligence, and ChatGPT launched, and there's so much excitement, and all of a sudden everyone's talking AI. But no one was talking about this type of AI and this use case of it. And I was like, and I think the alarm bells just went off, and I was like, oh, no, this is like a really dystopian type of AI abuse, and we're not even talking about it.
We're going back to like 2022, 2023, and I'm curious, like kind of, you've always looked around the corners. What were the things going on kind of in your life that you think really drew you ultimately to this story?
And it's like I've always said, I believe the fringes become the future, but it almost felt like we were living in the future because you have ChatGPT had launched, and there was this extraordinary moment where everyone was talking about AI. And then I guess if I could look at it personally, it took me a minute, but like finally met my person, got married, and from a personal standpoint, I felt like, we started thinking about having kids, having a baby, and I was just like, God, I think I see this thing that's coming down the pipeline when it comes to AI and a real negative use case that's going to impact our children. And we're not really talking about it at all. And so I think maybe, like, if I don't want to like psychoanalyze it too much, but I think that it's always felt professional, but all of a sudden it started feeling personal. And I kept thinking like, well, okay, what is the world that I'm going to bring my child if we end up having a baby? Like, what is that world going to look like? And I think like I stumbled on this testing ground that represented like a dystopian potential where we just lose control completely, where there's new types of bullying for children, where like the stakes felt so high, and it felt like this like darkness where like we either go this way or we can go the other way. And so I think that's where my obsession really with like Mr. Deepfakes came to, because I've always been such an optimist about technology, but I really believe that we have to like fight for that world, and we have to make sure tech works for us and not against us. And it's even more personal and high stakes as like all these things are happening in my personal life.
So we've heard this term deepfakes, Mr. Deepfakes. At a basic level, just what are we talking about?
At a base level, like this shady porn site had such tremendous impact, and no one was even talking about it. And it represented the future of AI and deepfakes, and it was so personal. So like Mr. Deepfakes is essentially the largest deepfake pornography site online. And to give you a sense of the scale, 17 million monthly visitors going to this site. And the site actually, it's like thousands of AI-generated videos of thousands of female celebrities with their faces essentially like grafted onto bodies, performing these really graphic sexual acts that they never filmed. And so you might say, okay, so it's like a celebrity porn site, like, I mean, who cares or what, like, and I will always care, but like, I think the reaction is, why should we really care about these celebrities?
Yeah, there's an element of, oh, well, this is just par for the course. If you're famous,
you're in the public eye,
yeah.
Right. So I would say, and Nicole, I would actually kind of like go to you for this. Like, I think I just remember looking at the site and being like, no, what this represents is so dangerous. And as we started digging in, we started really understanding why. Like you were looking at the site. What would you say? Like, what do you say are the couple things about the site that made it so dangerous?
I think the big thing that really made this site feel dangerous is that it wasn't just a video hosting platform. It was really a community. It was a place. It ultimately was the largest centralized deepfake community, and it was for AI porn. And on the site, there were a number of things you could do. You can watch graphic videos of these celebrities, these influencers, these public figures. But again, there's a loose definition of public figure. You can swap services via a marketplace. You can actually learn to create deepfakes. You can discuss the tech advancement, and you can join these forum chats with other users that really help to normalize this practice. I mean, what you really can see on the site as we dug in was like the future being built in real time. Like it was this idea of your wish is AI's command. And I mean, we talked about it. It really felt like a breeding ground for this kind of new dystopian reality. And I think, when the site first came into existence in 2018, it was much harder to make deepfakes. It was actually built on machine learning, and you'd spend, it was basically these thousands of pictures of data sets people would be gathering, and took a lot of computing power. And you saw that in this community was like, let's learn to actually do this. And there were these comprehensive guides. But then as this AI revolution really takes hold, and it gets easier and easier to find other ways to make deepfakes, this community is also talking about that. What's the latest app that I can use? And so you see all of these different ways in which the community is coming together to really create this future where women lose, control over their bodies online.
Well, and just to clarify, yes, there's a celebrity aspect of it. That was a big aspect of it. But what for you signaled that this is going to be, beyond just the famous folks, it's going into our communities?
I think a huge part of it was that it was teaching people how to do this. And so it was essentially building an army of Mr. Deepfakes, of people who could deepfake. And you can say that there are some rules and regulations on the site, but there's both evidence that they weren't being followed and evidence that people were already beginning to use them in different ways on the site. And so even on the site, you can see this trickle-down effect of people saying, I want to do this to somebody I know, because they would never do that in real life. And so you see the ways in which this is evolving and growing to be a bigger and bigger problem. And this site, in many ways, is the ground zero for that, that development.
I think that's exactly what it was. I think about, so celebrity deepfake porn, it's bad. It might be just a bad part of being in the public eye. But they say, imagine this nightmare scenario of going online, Googling your name, and all of a sudden seeing yourself, because the technology is not good, it's great. So doing these very graphic sexual things, it's top of your Google search. That must feel horrific. It's all AI generated. That is what this site is. And then, as you say, the site is also, a training ground for other Mr. Deepfakes, right? And making it so easy to be able to use these training manuals to actually go and do this and do it in your high schools or do it anywhere else. And so I still don't think it's okay that celebrities without their consent were having this happen. And also, to your point, public figure, their rules, we will learn later that they're really loose rules, but really it just represented a movement of deepfake porn. And I think the biggest thing for me is we are entering this era where with AI, you can essentially mimic our most intimate features, the features that make us human, our voice, our face, our bodies. And so that's when those lines between reality begin to blur. And I think that's really dangerous. And this site really represented, if we teach people that it's okay to do this, that your wish is AI's command, that you could have this woman doing this in this way, and if someone rejects you, these are the tools that you can use, and it's not complicated anymore from a tech standpoint. It's actually just a couple clicks. What world are we going to leave our kids with? That is not what I want to sign up for. I always joke, that is not the terms of service I am signing up for when it comes to the future. And so everything you're kind of talking about, and I'd love to kind of walk through some of those forum. I think when you kind of see those forum posts, you begin to understand, oh, wait, this is so much larger than a shady deepfake pornography site targeting celebrities. This is actually about a deepfake reality we are all entering where none of us are safe.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the other thing that you see with this site is it wasn't only deepfake porn. They talked about it themselves as a beta test for this new kind of tech overall. We're starting with deepfake porn, but this could really represent an entire deepfake reality in the future. And
the rate of change waits for no one. And I think that's the urgency I felt. I just saw it and I was like, no. I've got to scream and shout from the mountaintops. And that's why we make this joke about my obsession with deepfake porn and all the dinner table conversations where it's a little weird. But I think maybe it's how do we effectively communicate that? And the way I figured we could effectively communicate that is search for an anonymous man who is exposing thousands of women in the dark and say that this needs to come to light. And that's why I was like, we got to find this guy.
For you, how did it go from I'm frustrated and this is a very important issue to me to, what was next? What was the mission? How did the investigation start?
I think it started by saying, okay, yes, so frustrated. I'm so over people being genie's out of the bottle. We're screwed. I just think that's such a boring way to view progress. And so I think it was a simple idea of, okay, I want to find the person doing this, and for many reasons. And I think it came down to this idea of he's exposing thousands of women, but he would like to remain anonymous. And this blanket of anonymity, right? This idea of operating in the darkness really enables a different type of behavior. And one of the ways to change that is to bring that to light, right? We'll always say, oh, it's a game of whack-a-mole. If you can, find this guy and talk to him and shed light on it, there's just going to be all these other sites that exist. But I don't sign up for that. I think that there is a world where if I could find Mr. Deepfakes, if we could send the message that this shouldn't be allowed to happen in the dark, and if we can really call attention to this, then maybe we can actually make some change. Maybe we can help change laws. Maybe we can send a message that this doesn't get to happen behind closed doors. Maybe we can help women that are going through this feel less alone. Maybe we can tell people that this is a problem and get them to understand. And so I was like, I've got to find Mr. Deepfakes for all of those reasons. And so I decided to just launch the search. And so my thinking was, let's try to figure out who the anonymous figure behind the site is. Now, you have to remember, this site has been out there for many years, but the person who created it, who goes by the alias Mr. Deepfakes, has been anonymous for many, many years. I would say 5 years. And so I think part of it was, let's find him. Let's ask some hard questions. Mr. Deepfakes is kind of this almost he feels like the white whale of the internet. Who is this anonymous figure who has created not just this site, but this platform that is actually a movement towards what I would call a new type of digital deepfake dystopian abuse, right? And what do we know about him at the time, Nicole? Not a lot, right?
Right. He talked to media a couple of times from what we believe was the owner of Mr. Deepfakes.
From an anonymous handle,
From
right?
an anonymous handle. And also his fingerprint is all over the website. And so seeing those signs of this person who was really the ringleader and the powerful person behind the scenes of this site, I think really motivated this investigation.
Imagine if there was a very graphic AI-generated sex tape of you out there and someone's making money off of it and there was nothing you could do about it. What would that do to you mentally? And so I think all of these reasons, I was like, we got to find the guy. Or girl, but probably guy. Let's just be honest here.
And then, when did this kick into high gear? When did it go from where, I want to find him to we're actually going to...
Okay, so it's January 2024, and something big happens. Taylor Swift is deepfaked. There are sexually explicit deepfakes of Taylor Swift that are just going viral all over the internet on X. And at the time, I was just like, God, this is so horrific, right? Obviously, you would hate to see this happen to anyone, a public figure, anyone. But I thought, okay, people didn't even know what a sexually explicit deepfake was. They didn't even know the term deepfake pornography. But I'll tell you something. If it happens to Taylor Swift, people start paying attention. It shouldn't have to happen to Taylor Swift for you to pay attention. But I thought, okay, this is our window. This is now beginning to enter the public purview. After these sexually explicit deepfakes of Taylor Swift went out, I said, okay, I'm going to publicly launch this search for Mr. Deepfakes. This is the moment.
So Mr. Deepfakes, when we looked at it, we realized it was also a place where people were making money and profiting off of these images. The site is running ads throughout this time, and so makes ad revenue, pop-up ads that'll come up at the bottom that are advertising other AI sex cam videos and apps. And there's also a marketplace on Mr. Deepfakes where users can connect with people who can make them for a fee, commission a specific deepfake. You can watch pay-per-view deepfakes that people are posting. Some users have subscription services. Some users are selling courses. And so a big part of this community is also profiting off of this new form of abuse.
And I just to add to that, it's not like this is just AI generated pornography, right? Honestly, that's not the thing I'm going to go after. It's this idea that it's of women who did not consent, who have these hyper realistic sex tapes of them that other people are profiting off of that are AI generated. And that just to me was what happens to consent here? That's insane to me.
Right. It seemed that one of the core missions of whoever created this site was to use it to make money.
You know, the thing that really was so eye-opening about what happened with Taylor Swift was that in order to protect her, in order to get on top of this, they actually ended up having to take her off of like X or having to like take down her account. So just take a moment with that. One of the most powerful women in the world, if this happens to her, the way to protect her is to silence her, for her to disappear. I mean, that's and what hope is there for the rest of us? What hope is there for your child if this happens to your child? And so I think that was really eye-opening at the time.
With such a big public eye on something like that, though, why was Mr. Deepfakes able to exist, able to prevail with no legal action?
It was so crazy. And I think part of why I was so interested in that, it always starts with this question of, wait, what? Why is this allowed? Why should like some shady figure on the internet be able to profit off of your name, your likeness, and create hyper-realistic sex tapes of you with AI without your consent and it be the top of your Google search? Like, surely that can't be legal. Oh, wait, actually, no one's talking about this and the laws haven't caught up. And it is legal in many places. And so I think that was kind of like, that's I think what made this like kind of urgency around like, no, we don't just need this site to like shut down. We don't need to just find this guy. We actually need laws that actually protect people from having this happen to them, especially as we're entering like this wild west of the AI era and the laws historically have been slow to catch up.
Felt at this time like everything was starting to really spread, right? Yeah. It's like the tentacles were reaching out. And when you went back and looked at this, you saw this origin point and this ground zero, and it said, okay, this also represents how we choose to respond to this new tech. Like people were this notion of like, this is the first kind of AI harm that we're seeing with this tech, and what are we going to do about it?
And let's just be honest, and I don't want to get on like a TED talk here, but like harms that impact like women and minorities oftentimes aren't like, I just have to say, if this were happening to like Donald Trump, if there were lots of AI porn of Donald Trump, like maybe this would have been fixed, or a lot of these male legislators. I really believe that so many times, like, you know, these numbers, it happens to women, and oftentimes it gets ignored. And I think like this story is not new. It's just like, this is it on steroids and it's AI generated, and we got to talk about it.